now that Caesar, Crassus, and Pompey have decided on renewing the triumvirate, and they've not only just renewed the triumvirate in general, they've renewed it for an additional for 5 more years. So they would expire in roughly 51 BCE, and that in 51 BCE, the three of them would come back together and discuss things in the future about whether they want to work together or not again. And so Caesar knows that Crassus and Pompey are going to be in Spain handling their consulship, and then eventually Crassus going off to Syria, and Pompey sending messages back and forth to Spain while ruling from Rome himself. And so Caesar kind of takes it under his own realization that it's safe to start conquering wherever he wants in Gaul and maybe other places. And so while he's in this area of Gaul on this side over here, he decides actually to invade an area called Germania, which is present-day Germany, okay? And so to do that, he has to cross the Rhine River, which, by the way, is this little blue line right here. Okay, and so the Rhine River is is a very wide river. It is about 1,300 to 1,500 feet wide, this area of water that he plans on crossing. It gets a little bit wider and also thinner in different areas of the Rhine, but the area that he finds is about 1,300 to 1,500 feet wide. And he decides that it's a very dangerous river and too dangerous to cross by boat with his soldiers. And the reason why it's too dangerous to cross by boat is because of the strong current of the river. Not to mention, you would be shifted down very far downstream, okay, downriver, that you might not, if a bunch of soldiers were to go together over across in multiple boats, they might not end up together, and that could be dangerous because of all the Germany, on the other side, where Germany is, there's tons of other tribes, the Germanic tribes. Not just the Gallic tribes that he's been fighting, but the Germanic tribes in Germany. And so he's worried about having his men split up if that happens. Also, there are obstacles in the river, such as rocks, like basically rapids, as well as downed trees and branches and things like that sometimes get stuck on rocks or stuck in the dirt or whatever and are jagged up into the thing. And so it's dangerous for boats to cross it. So he decides he's going to build a river with his legions of men. And so he and several of his legions of men decide to build a bridge. And one of the interesting things about the Roman soldiers at the time, the Roman legionnaires, is, remember I told you that they used to carry all of their gear with them, okay, and all of their equipment with them? Well, they wouldn't just do that, and they wouldn't just be expected to march for 10 or 20 miles a day, and they wouldn't just carry all their stuff and then make a camp and then the next day pick it all up and then march again, okay? They were expected also to be able to make construction of different things, such as bridges and forts and things like that, using whatever tools they were bringing with them. And so they would constantly make things out of wood, obviously, out of the trees. And so they decide, or Caesar decides, that he wants to make a bridge across the Rhine River in the year 56 to 55. It varies on the source on when exactly this happened. But sometime between 56 BCE or 55 BCE, and for a process of 10 days, or a length of time of 10 days, they build this massive bridge across the Rhine River. And the way they do it is by building bit by bit. And as you can see, these logs, okay, the trees, okay, of this model, are at an angle. Okay, they're at an angle. And they're at an angle because if they're at an angle, they are able to stick in the water better, and that if they were just upright, the force of water would kind of start pushing them over. But if they're at an angle already and wedged in at an angle, the amount of water and everything kind of going around them will flow more naturally, in a slightly different way. It's a lot of engineering there, but that's how it worked. He also made these extra wedge-shaped barriers with basically wooden shields on the edges of them, or just lots of branches and reeds tied to there, so that these would protect the actual pylons of the or pilings of the bridge itself. They used basically a small raft attached to it constantly with a very large rock on on a pulley system to slam down the log into the water and into the dirt. Basically pile driving, an engineering method used today, pile driving logs, or in this case today, which I wish this video would actually work on this other video for you, but as you can see, I will link this video below for you to also watch, but you end up having this modern day construction site where they would have the cement foundation or whatever about to be built in, but before they do that, they would drive down cement or steel beams into the ground to stabilize the building. And what they would do is they would end up having a large crane, and they have a very large weight driving it down and smashing the metal pole, these metal poles, further and further into the ground to make a foundation. Okay, that's modern pile driving, okay? You've probably seen it from the road while driving past. Maybe some of you actually work in construction or have family members that have worked in construction. And so you've probably seen this tons of times, and maybe you've understood exactly what it is, maybe not, and that's okay. Hopefully this teaches you a little bit about this. But they build this bridge, and this bridge, of course, is going to be over the entire Rhine River, and of course that means the bridge will have to be 1,300 to 1,500 feet long. It's 40 feet wide, because he wants an entire, basically, century of men to be able to march not width across it, but several men, about 5 or 6 men at least wide, if not closer to 10, walk across it at a time. And he wants to be able to get his entire army across it very quickly. And while he is building it, the Germanic tribesmen are on the other side of the river watching him and his people build this bridge. They've never even crossed this river before, other than by boat. They've never built a bridge across it, certainly. And so they're all kind of staring wide-eyed and also kind of scared that this army is building this bridge across the Rhine River to get to them. And so they kind of start freaking out about it, and so he eventually and his men end up making it across the river, and they stay in Germania for 18 days, and fight off some of the Germanic tribes, the ones that actually didn't run away scared, and decides, okay, now that I've explored Germany for a bit, let's go back to Gaul, because there's other Gallic tribes on the far side of Gaul causing issues that he's finding out about. So it took 10 days to build the bridge, and he builds across it, this massive bridge, with, of course, cranes like this with the big rock that would slam down the log here into the dirt. Okay, this is a picture of one of those cranes. And so, after staying only for 18 days, barely longer than he built the bridge for, or took to build the bridge, he decides, okay, well, let's just trash the bridge and don't let the Germans use it to come into Gaul, because he couldn't allow the Germans to do that, and decided, okay, well, he's got what he wanted. He actually repeats the process in 53 BCE. I'm not going to go over it again when he does that. There's no point, but in 53 BCE, he actually crosses the Rhine a second time, just to do it again, and he stays there that time for a few weeks, conquering a little bit of Germany, or Germania. And so Caesar basically built these bridges, or his troops built these bridges, and he, of course, writes about it in the Gallic Wars. And it's just, again, a marvel of Roman engineering, okay, is to think about this. Is this this incredible bridge built in such a short time with very, I guess, primitive by our standards of technology, but it's kind of the same kind of process that we use today right here. Just slightly different. As opposed to the crane being made of wood and concrete, or metal and concrete, it's wood and rock. Moving on, Caesar also decided, when he conquered a little bit more of Gaul over here, he decided to march back to here, and decided to cross to Oceanus, as it was called. He, at this point, has raised a total to 10 legions, okay? He is no longer just marching around Gaul with his 4 original legions. He added 6 more legions, almost from scratch, where he basically brought in new recruits for every single one of the 5,280 men in each. And so he's got this massive army now, and they're able to start spreading out through all of Gaul together and fighting against the Gallic tribes to keep them peaceful as well as also conquer them, depending on their type. And he also hears about rumors about Oceanus. He wants to conquer Oceanus. He's already gone to Germany or Germania, and now he wants to go, and he's conquered most of Gaul. He now wants to go to Oceanus and find out what it's about. Oceanus, of course, has been known around since Phoenician times. Remember, the Phoenicians traded from the Mediterranean Sea all the way to Britain, and that is exactly what Oceanus is. It is present-day Britain or England. Okay? But back then, the Romans called it Oceanus, as in this island in the ocean. And they knew from the Phoenicians what Oceanus had, and it had a lot of it, tin. It had tons and tons of tin, which was very useful for making bronze, as well as also using for all sorts of other things. And so the Romans, especially Caesar, want all of this tin from Oceanus. And so in 55 BCE, he decides to cross the 20-mile stretch of water here by boat, and he only takes a small force, a few hundred men. And it's not very large, and he realizes, okay, Oceanus is much bigger than people said. It is a very large island. I'm going to need more troops, and I'm going to need, because there are another group of people called the Celts, or Celtic tribes, living in Britain, or the Britons. And so he decides he's going to need a larger expedition, and so finally in the year 54 BCE, he takes 800 ships, 5 legions, and about 2,000 additional cavalry soldiers across from here to Britain or Oceanus. This will be one of the largest ever invasions, one way over the channel or the other, okay? There were 3 major invasions successful going from one side of the English Channel to the other, either from Britain to France or from France to Britain. And the 3 of them are Caesar, okay, and his legion, his successful attack in 54 BCE with the 800 ships, 5 legions, which is, 20,000 men, plus another 2,000 there, so 22,000 men at least. William the Conqueror, which we'll talk about in 1066 CE, okay, near the end of this course, this semester, takes 7,000 men from France and invades Britain. And then the last other invasion that is successful going one way or the other is in D-Day during World War II on June 6, 1944, when British, American, Canadian, and several other small countries that were allied with Britain at the time invaded France to fight against the Nazis, also in this same area of land here, okay? This same area around here. So very close. And they took 130 to 156,000 men, depending on whether you want to just count it as June 6th, or if you want to count it in the next few weeks afterwards, where they continued sending troops across to fight against the Nazis under Adolf Hitler of Germany. And so this is quite amazing for Caesar to do this in 54 BCE, okay, of course. This number of men, 800 ships to get all of his men across. And of course, once they land here in Britain, they end up marching up from Britain, and they eventually reach the River Thames, the Thames River. It's spelled Thames, but it's called the Thames, okay? It's the river that goes through the city of London, and eventually the Romans do make a small village there at Londinium, but at this time Caesar basically decides that he's not going to stick around. He and his troops stay there for a couple months or weeks and decide they've conquered a bunch of the Celtic tribes, and that there's going to be more Celtic tribes, and he's also having problems with more Gauls down here, and so he basically tells the Celtic tribal leaders, pay me tribute and I'll leave you alone, or I'll kill you all. And so the Celtic tribes decide that they're going to pay tribute to the Romans, and it would be a lump sum of massive amounts of tin that they've got. And so the Celtic tribes give him a large tribute of tin, and then Caesar marches back from the river Thames all the way to the coast, gets on his 800 ships, and then cross back to France, to Gaul. And so that is his conquering of Britain, where he really doesn't conquer it, but he kind of defeats the Celts for a little bit. And so we end up having quite a large area now kind of explored by Caesar. If we go to the map here, he started with only this area. This little pink area here was what he was in command of, but now he's basically conquered most of Gaul. He's gone into Germania, and he's now gone to Britain. Well, at this time, in 55 BCE, Pompey is now staying in Rome, but he's sending letters back and forth to Spain, and Crassus is now taking several legions that he's raised with Pompey's help to Syria, because he plans on attacking an empire out here called the Parthians. And so who are these Parthians? Well, let's talk about that in the next lecture video.